Our focal point this morning is Hebrews tells us that Jesus helps those who are tempted in suffering because he did it too. Right? We read that at the very end of chapter 2. Because of that, we fix our thoughts on Jesus. It's kind of like when I was a little kid growing up in north central Wyoming. We would get tremendous snowstorms with drifting snow from blowing wind. And when we would go out and about, we still had to do shopping, we still had to do school, we still had to do normal life. And I was a little kid, the snow would be so deep, it would be hard for me to walk in it. And my dad would always just turn around and tell me, just step where I step, son, and you'll be able to move along just fine. That's what God does for us through his son Jesus. He steps in those deep drifting of the snow drifts, and we're able to walk where he walks, and when we do that, it's easy going for us. Not easy in the fact that we still won't suffer, we still won't have pain, but it's easy in the fact that we will have peace knowing that we're stepping where our Father has stepped. And very similarly to that, I just saw a thing on social media the other day. It was a father talking to his son, and the father was telling son, you need to be careful where you step. And the son looks up at his father and says, you need to be careful where you step because I follow wherever you go. The same thing is true with God. We follow God wherever he goes when our heart is committed to him, when we accept him as our Father, when we're his disciples, we step where he steps. And God always knows the best place to step. So when we follow him, it's easy. So we fix our thoughts on Jesus because he went before us. He suffered. He was tempted. And he overcame it all. So if Jesus did it, he gives us the power to do it too. The Bible tells us that the same power that rose Jesus from the grave now lives in us. And so we fix our thoughts on Jesus. It is easy for us to get distracted by situations and circumstances. If we fix our thoughts on Jesus, he will make a way for us. Let's listen to what the author of Hebrews says. Hebrews chapter 3, therefore, holy brothers who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest whom we confess. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Moses was faithful as a servant in all God's house, testifying to what would be said in the future. But Christ is faithful as a son over God's house. And we are his house if we hold on to our courage and hope of which we boast. So as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, you do not harden your hearts, as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the desert, where your fathers tested and tried me, and for 40 years saw what I did. This is why I was angry with that generation, and I said, their hearts are always going astray, and they have not known my ways. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage one another daily as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We have come to share in Christ if we hold firmly till the end the confidence we had at first. As has just been said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart as you did in the rebellion. Who were they who heard and rebelled? Were they not all those Moses led out of Egypt? And with whom was he angry for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the desert? And to whom did God swear that they would never enter rest, if not to those who disobeyed? So we see that they were not able to enter because of their unbelief. So there's a couple things that we need to focus on in this chapter of the book of Hebrews. The first of which is a direct command to us. It's a directive. It's not an option. It's not something that's an opinion. It's something that we must do. And that is the idea of fixing your thoughts on Jesus. Therefore, holy brothers who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest whom we confess. It's interesting because many translations say fix your thoughts or fix your minds or focus on. The Greek word that's used here is a rather interesting word because it's a contraction of two Greek words put together to make one new word. And that's katanosete, which means, kata means apply or put forward, and nose, which we all know. Nous is the Greek word that means your mind, your intellect, and your will. It's a very important concept in Greek culture. So what the apostle is who wrote the book of Hebrews is telling us is that we have to apply all of our mind to thinking about who Jesus is. Every single brain cell that you could muster goes to thinking about Jesus. It's not just a little bit. It's not half-hearted applying yourself to the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not just a sliver of your thinking. I'll give God 1 minute today, and then everything else is mine. It's every single thing that you could think is thought through the lens of Jesus Christ. One of the ways that I like to describe this is C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors of all time, said it this way: I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen. Not sun Jesus, but sun, the actual physical orb that's in the sky. I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen, not because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. The sun gives off light and illuminates everything around us. It helps us to see the beautiful landscape around us, the amazing flower garden you have in your backyard, your spouse's beautiful, shining, radiant face in the morning. Everything that you can see is seen because of the sun. So everything that we see is seen through the Son, Jesus Christ. All of our thoughts, all of our feelings, all of our attitudes, all of our actions are filtered through the lens of who Jesus is. And so the command to fix our thoughts on Jesus is something of great importance to us. Because when we do that, everything else falls by the wayside. All the doctrine, all the dogma, all the religion, all of the self-righteousness, all of the pride, all of the arrogance, all of wanting things for yourself fall at the side when you look at things through the eyes of Jesus. The common prayer has always been, God, let me see things the way you see them, and let my heart breaks for what breaks yours. And so that's what we must do. We fix our thoughts on Jesus. Everything that Jesus did, we now emulate. He becomes the perfect representation of God and holiness for us. And so we do what Jesus did. That includes loving the sinner and the tax collector, hanging out and eating with them. A lot of times Christians get this idea of the only friends you can have are Christian people too. How sad and a miserable world is that? When all the Christians gather in their enclaves and in their monasteries and convents, and we recluse ourselves, we pull away from society. When Jesus did the exact opposite thing. He would eat with the sinners and the tax collectors. He would speak with the women, even if they were Samaritan women. He would care for the prostitutes and the forbidden people to talk to in society. He would go to the outcast, chase them down. He would leave the 99 to save the one. So as Christians, we do the same thing too. We don't stop talking to people because they don't come to church. That's the exact wrong opposite attitude to have. When God said go into all the world, He didn't mean go to the church in the next city, because there weren't any churches. So we go where Jesus goes. He goes to the places that are undesirable. This doesn't mean that you go and have a fifth bottle of whiskey over at the tavern. That's not what I'm saying to do. Or go hang out in the smoke shop and light up a bowl with your buddies. What I am saying is that you take Jesus to the world. You don't let the world influence you. You take Jesus to the world, and this is exactly what the apostles did 2,000 years ago. 12 men, think about it, 12 men completely changed the dynamic of society and culture as it had been known. Greek and Roman paganism ruled the world. 12 men, uneducated craftsmen and fishermen, went there and changed everything about it. 320 years after the death of Jesus Christ, Rome became a Christian nation. When Constantine gave his decree that it would now become the state religion of Rome. Can you think about that? Does that register in your mind? 12 uneducated fishermen and tradesmen completely changed the dynamic of the world as we had known it. All the high and lofty philosophy of Socrates and Epicurus and all of them were pushed aside for the ethic and philosophy of Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. And now there isn't a continent on the earth who haven't heard about Jesus because of the legacy of 12 men. We go to the sinners. We go to the tax collectors. We speak to the people who are undesirable in our society because of the fact that we fix our eyes on Jesus. We apply every ounce of our mental capabilities to thinking about Jesus. And when we do that, we act differently. The thing about Christianity that sets it apart from every other world religion is that it truly affects change in people's lives. And I'm sure you've experienced it in your own life. Addiction, oppression, depression, things in life that seemed insurmountable, but when you came into a relationship with Jesus Christ, it all changes. That's the power of the resurrection. And so we fix our eyes and our thoughts on Jesus. There isn't anything else we care about. We do what Jesus did. We love like Jesus loved. We are Jesus to our world. I remember hearing a story not too long ago about Gandhi, who was being asked in an interview by an American reporter what he thought about Jesus. And he said, Jesus, oh, I love Jesus. He was a great moral philosopher. It's his Christians that I don't really care for. Because a lot of times as Christians we don't act like Jesus does. We do exactly what the world does and call that Christianity. All the lust of the flesh and pride of life filters into us, and we do exactly what the world does, and this isn't helped by televangelists and Christian television who go out there and flash their wealth, their $45 million mansions, their 5 private jets, their Rolls Royces and Mercedes-Benz, patent leather shoes. That is not Jesus. And so it's easy for people to be confused who don't know Jesus, to have a warped idea and perspective of who Jesus is. And a lot of people will look at those people on TV and say, if that's what Jesus is, I don't want anything to do with him. The world can offer people riches. Jesus offers you something far more valuable than that. All of the riches of the world heaped on the scale of eternity doesn't even tip the scale in favor of it. The Apostle Paul tells us that we have an eternal weight of glory. You could accumulate all of the riches that have ever existed on earth, and it wouldn't even tip the scale. So we fix our thoughts on Jesus. And when we do that, when we fix our thoughts on Jesus, when He becomes the center of our life, the epicenter of everything we are and everything we do, there is something that happens to us. We can hold on to courage and hope. And this is interesting because at the time of the writing of the book of Hebrews was during the Emperor Nero's reign in Rome. And we know from history that time in history was a pretty brutal time if you called yourself a Christian. You would be rounded up, you would be thrown in the arena to fight gladiators or wild animals. We know that a young lady named Perpetua was thrown into the arena to fight lions, all because of the fact she called herself a Christian. Roman soldiers would gather you up, impale you with a stake, and put you in Nero's garden and light you on fire to light his gardens at night. And so we have the author of the book of Hebrews telling us that we can hold on to courage and hope. Why? Because when we fix our thoughts on Jesus, we don't just see this world. We see a whole nother world that lies beyond it that is far more impressive than this one. Far more costly. Far more good. Because that's where Jesus is. And so when we fix our thoughts on Jesus, we don't fix our eyes on this earth. All the horror that happens around us. Every day I watch the news and I think to myself, could humanity get any more depraved than it already is? And I'm always given the answer, yes. Always. You don't know the limits of human depravity. And so with all of that going on around us, the chaos and the tempest and the fury and the raging and all of it together, we are able to say, I have hope, I have courage, I have peace, I have joy, unspeakable and full of glory. No suffering, no pain, no misery can conquer the love of Jesus. So we're able to hold on to our courage. In the middle of the worst news you could ever receive in your life, you're able to hold on to courage and hope. Just like the 3 sons of Israel going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar, we know that our God is mighty to save us, but even if He doesn't, yet will we praise Him. That's Christianity in a nutshell. That's what it's all about. You could be driving down the highway with your family in the car and smash head on to somebody else, and your kids go flying through the windshield. They lie dead on the asphalt, and you're able to run out and cradle them in your arms and say, "Yet will I praise you." You could lose everything in a fire or bankruptcy or financial ruin. You could be given the diagnosis of cancer. You have 6 weeks to live, and yet you can say in your heart, I will praise Him. Because we fix our thoughts on Jesus and we hold on to courage and hope. The hope of the blessed beatific vision with God in heaven. That's why we do what we do. That's what motivates us to be good people. You see, because we don't want to keep it for ourselves, we want to share it with our neighbor. If it's going to be that good and that great, we want everybody to experience it too. So there isn't a single person on this earth that we won't take the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ to. And we believe. Because unbelief is a horrible, nasty, ugly thing. Last week we talked a little bit about existence and reality on a cosmic scale. If you're an atheist and agnostic, you are hopeless. Literally. It's all going to end one day. The heat death of the universe, maximum entropy, whatever kind of scientific term you want to put to it, it is all going to end one day. Our sun will cease to be a main sequence star. It'll become a red giant, eventually leading to a black hole in the universe, consuming everything around it. And if you believe that there is no God, there isn't anything for you once you are dead. There's just blackness, there's just nothingness, there's just void, there's just emptiness, there's just hopelessness, there's just nihilism. So if you're an atheist, what is there for you to look onto, to hold on to measure the significance of your life with? Because if atheism is true, everything ends up in the dung pile of history. All of the human achievements, all of the human failures end up the same. It's a wash. All of the altruism of Mother Teresa and Father Damien of Molokai and Bill McChesney, the people who gave their lives to the gospel of Jesus Christ, end up the same as the acts of Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot and Adolf Hitler and Ceausescu. It all ends the same because everybody will die and human history will be forgotten on a cosmic scale. So if you don't believe, that's all you have. If you don't have the hope of Jesus Christ in your life, that is all you can look forward to. And so a lot of times people who don't believe, though they might have the outward appearance of living a good life, having contentment in their heart, they're constantly wrestling with this idea inside of themselves. We know for a fact that Nietzsche, the founder of the idea of nihilism, died a madman in his bed, waving his fist at heaven, because there was no hope for him if his ideas and philosophy and thoughts were true. All of his accomplishments don't mean anything on the cosmic scale. And so when we believe in who Jesus said he was, we have hope. And ultimately we have courage and joy and peace that passes understanding, because he promises us so much more than what we can experience in this life. You want to talk about ultimate reality? There is nothing more ultimate than the complete existential fulfillment of every desire of your heart. You've longed for perfect love, you will find it in Jesus. You've longed for perfect peace, you find it in Jesus. You've longed for perfect hope, it is there to be found in Jesus. You're looking for answers to the misery of your life, the oppression, the depression, the addiction, the pain, the suffering, the sorrow. It is found in Jesus. Because Jesus wasn't like the gods of Greek mythology, of Norse mythology, of Egyptology. He is the God that put on human flesh, was hungry, was thirsty, was cold, was abandoned, was lonely, suffered and died on the cross, and rose again so that we could have eternal life with him. Every misery that you could experience in life, Jesus did it too. That's what makes him different than Odin or Poseidon or Zeus or Thor or Horus or Osiris or any of them. He donned human flesh, suffered the pain of death, but conquered it all because he is the Son of the living God. And so we believe. Our final thought this morning as we wrap up. The author of Hebrews uses several analogies to help us understand the preeminence of Jesus. He is the sent one. He is our high priest. He is the builder of the house. He is the son of the house. We fix our minds and thoughts on Jesus and him alone. We do not need to worry ourselves about the law, being good enough, earning our salvation. When our minds are kept on Christ, we don't have to worry about doing the right thing, being moral people, or being good enough. All of those things will come naturally to us as a consequence of having our minds in the right place. This will lead us to a place of courage and hope, despite all the trials, temptations, and suffering around us. So I like to close every week by giving you an encouragement. My encouragement to you this week is if you're suffering, if you're in pain, if you're afflicted, if you're tormented, if you're going through the worst trial of your life, or maybe not even the worst, maybe it's just a little hiccup on the trail of life, push into Jesus. Because he sees you. He sees your trial. He sees your suffering. He sees your sorrow, your misery, your heartache, your loneliness. Everything that you could think of, he sees it. And the author of the book of Hebrews tells us because he himself suffered, he is able to help those who are suffering too. That's the God we serve. The God of those who suffer. Not only is he the God of triumph and majesty and sovereignty and kingship, he is the Lamb that was slain for us. A meek and lowly baby born in a manger to a poor mom and dad. They weren't able to give him the luxuries of life. But he became the King of the world through suffering. A lot of times as human beings, we like to shun suffering. I shouldn't have to go through it. The air conditioning isn't working in my car. What's going on? Everything is out of cosmic imbalance. I can't function at work. I can't take care of my family because I don't have air conditioning in my car. Then you call Lums or the other dealerships and you say, the air conditioning is out of my car and I need it fixed now. And they're like, but we have a waiting list. It's okay to suffer. Something happens in our suffering that brings us closer to the heart of Jesus. Because he suffered too.